And for me, that made it very hard to accept the Rose opportunity. And I really only accepted it because I had no other opportunity. So it was sort of life saying, this is going to be your next chapter. This is what you're doing.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of On the Wind. I'm your host, Andy Schell. I'm recording this ahead of time. So this episode's going to come out 2 weeks after approximately that I record this. I'm going to be on vacation. The first vacation I've taken in many, many years. Actual vacation. Well, actually, I'm not going anywhere. We're staying at home, but I'm going to be fiddling around with Spica. I'm actually going down there today to take her out of the shed and do a fall cleaning because we didn't actually launch the boat this year. So she needs a good wash down. We're going to clean out the shed, fiddle around with the boat, and going to watch a lot of movies and read a lot of books and just be mellow, go for bike rides. Haven't had much time for myself lately, so it's going to be fun to take a couple weeks off. It's only 2 weeks, so I'll be back. In the meantime, we'll have Nikki on the show and August on the show, and Ben Doe are back on the show as hosts, and then I'll be back sometime in October on the podcast. This is a really fun episode. I normally don't when people like solicit me, like saying they want to be on the show, I normally kind of scoff at that, but occasionally we get someone. In this case, it was a publicist, actually, for a publishing company. This guy, Will Sofrin, had written a book, and the book looked really cool. They sent me a copy. I read it, and I actually read it on Falcon earlier this year on the way up to Nova Scotia, and it was just, I could not put it down. It's like the book was like made for me, actually made for August more so than me. But basically the book is called All Hands on Deck. And it was about Will and this crew of tall ship sailors were hired by a Hollywood production company to sail a tall ship from New England around to Los Angeles. And it was the ship that was going to be used in the movie Master and Commander. And it was very cool because it's this whole tall ship world. But Will, at the time, was like a crew on sort of classic yachts and was a shipwright, trained as a shipwright, and had done some offshore deliveries. Very, very relatable to the way my career has been, aside from the shipwright stuff. And then all of a sudden, he's transported into this tall ship world and talks about that. And then, of course, the book weaves its way through the history of the movie, the actual history of the HMS Surprise, back in the day, what it would have really been like. And it's got a foreword. I think the foreword was written by one of the executives at Sony who had the movie made. And it was just like combined all these awesome things that I love, adventure in the high seas, sailing, tall ship, old school stuff, movies, one of my favorite movies. I think it maybe is August's favorite movie. So just a really cool, a really amazing book. I loved every page of it, and you will too. I highly recommend it. It's called All Hands on Deck. We'll have the links to this in the show notes. And then, of course, my conversation with Will was like just as great. He is just a couple years older than me. We have a similar sort of sailing background, upbringing, and we talked, as we usually do on these podcasts, about how he got into sailing, and then how he got roped into this tall ship expedition, and what that was like coming from the world of yachts to the world of tall ships. We talked about his writing process on the book and a whole host of other things. It was a really great conversation, recorded from the nav station on Falcon, actually while I was in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, which is where the boat was built that they delivered around to Hollywood. So that was kind of fitting, even though we did this on Zoom. So really fun conversation, really great book. I recommend it highly. Will Sofrin's All Hands on Deck. Go check it out. And I hope you enjoy the book as much as I did, and I hope you enjoy the interview with Will, which is coming right up. On the Wind is supported this season by AG1, the daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. I gave AG1 a try because offshore, eating balanced nutritional meals comes secondary to managing the boat, not to mention managing my sleep and seasickness. I drink AG1 as part of my routine in the watch schedule, usually before my first cup of coffee, and it makes me feel confident that I'm getting the nutrition I need no matter how the rest of my day's eating goes. I actually started drinking AG1 years ago as part of my fitness routine ashore before 59 North even existed, but now that I spend a big chunk of my time at sea each year, it's become an even more important part of my routine. in order to maintain my overall health while my main focus is required elsewhere on the boat. I can cover all my nutritional bases for the whole day with 1 scoop of AG1 mixed in my water bottle each morning. It tastes great, makes me feel great, and it costs less than $3 a day. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 Travel Packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/onthewind. That's drinkag1.com/onthewind. Check it out. On the Wind is also supported by our very good friends, back again, Forbes Horton Yachts. We've had a fantastic relationship with Forbes over the years. He's been a friend of mine in Annapolis and a work colleague for many, many years. In fact, since long before 59 North even existed. Forbes is a sailor himself, so he understands boats. He understands offshore sailing especially. He and his wife took a Tartan 34 to the Caribbean and back in the day. And they still sail today on the Chesapeake. If you have a boat that you're looking to buy, whether or not Forbes is listing it, he can be your buyer's broker. Or if it's come time to sell your boat, he can, of course, list it and be your selling broker. Forbes is fun to work with. He's a really great guy, knows his stuff, and is not your typical blowhard broker. So check out ForbesYachts.com. That's FORBES, ForbesYachts.com. And if you're around at the Annapolis Sailboat Show, he will be there at the X Yachts exhibition, which is out on the docks, out by where the Woodwind is, and you can meet us there. We'll announce this later, but a couple times a day we're going to fire the cannon out at Forbes's booth with X Yachts. So go say hi to Forbes if you're at the boat show this year, and if you want to buy or sell your dream boat, check out ForbesYachts.com. Thanks again to Forbes Horton for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. You're listening to On the Wind, my podcast about offshore sailing. I'm your host, Andy Schell. Will Sofrin is, among other things, a sailor, shipwright, and a writer, author of the new book, All Hands on Deck. The story is a maritime adventure memoir that follows a crew of misfits hired to sail an 18th-century warship 6,000 miles to Hollywood, the ship which would become the HMS Surprise in the movie Master and Commander. Will was just 21 at the time, working on yachts and somewhat directionless. I talked to him about the adventure on the high seas and how the book came to be. All right, cool. All right, we're going to get started, Will. I always start these, especially when we're not in person, to ask the guest to describe the setting. So if you want to just tell me a second about where are you at and what is it like where you're recording from right now?
Let's see. I am on Nantucket, and I am in a house that's in the town of Matticat, which is in the southwestern corner. Beautiful blue skies. I can see the ocean outside at the window I'm looking at right now, and having a nice day.
Awesome. Well, the reason I wanted to do this week, I am recording from Falcon. We're on anchor in Lunenburg. I just sailed up here from Annapolis, and the reason I wanted to record from here is the book that you wrote is about this ship Rose, which was built in Lunenburg, which I learned in the book, which is cool. So, like, I can basically see out the port, the shipyard where the Rose was built, and I just thought that would be a neat kind of place to record from to talk about your book.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's very cool. I'm a little jealous because I have yet to visit Lunenburg myself.
Oh, no way. Wow. Well, this is like my all-time favorite port. I think I've been in here. You know, we run these offshore passage charters, and I think I've been in and out of Lunenburg more than any other port that we visited in the last 9 years of doing business. So it's really nice to be here. The Blue Nose sailed in and out today. We have, like, you know, it's foggy in the morning, sunshine today, so it's such a cool place. Very, very nautical here, as is in Nantucket, I guess, too. So what are you doing in Nantucket? Because you're not from there, right? Or you don't live there?
No. Yeah, no, I live in Santa Barbara, California, and I am on a pretty big book tour for the book. So I've been...
Oh, nice.
Yeah, in the last week, I was speaking on the Cape. I was in Martha's Vineyard and spoke in Nantucket here on Monday, and I'm speaking tomorrow as well.
So, Will, when I first I think I got contacted by your publisher, I guess, about having you on and talking about the book. And like sometimes I get these emails and I'm like, yeah, whatever, this is dumb. But the book like caught my eye, and then when I started reading it, for some reason I had the impression that it was kind of like a quote unquote old timer book, like you were like 70 years old writing this, and then I realized that you're actually like only a year or two older than me, I think. So it was written like it's a contemporary story, and that really resonated with me, even though it took place 20 years ago. So what is the sort of the elevator pitch on what this book is about and what I want to talk to you about today? What do you tell people? Okay, you got this book. What's the story?
I like to say this book to me is sort of like Princess Bride on the water. It's a story of 30 misfits. You get people from all different walks of life coming together, men and women, and delivering a tall ship from Newport, Rhode Island to San Diego, California. And in the process, to go make a movie, and in the process, encounter some extreme conditions. I mean, a hurricane strength storm in the North Atlantic, and then a dismasting in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. And we are really forced to put our differences aside, work together. We're living together, and just, it's about learning how to work with the people that you're with and getting through it. And that's, I kind of faltered there. Sorry, Andy.
No,
you want me to do that again?
That's great. No, that's great. That's okay. I really I related to the book because how old are you now, Will?
So I'm 42 and I was 21 when I did the journey.
Okay, cool. Because I'm 30. I'll turn 40 in January. So you're, like I said, a couple years older than me. But I related to it because it sounded like you had just gotten into sailing, and I guess I want to start there. Like you'd been professional sailing on yachts, and then you go to this tall ship world, and those people listening to this that are working on sailboats, like you make very clear in the book, and I think all of us know that it's kind of like two different worlds. You have like you even call it Planet Tall Ship in your book. So what was the world of sailing that you came from, and how did you wind up like as a professional sailor in the first place?
So after high school, I took a path less traveled and I enrolled in an apprenticeship then it was called the International Yacht Restoration School. Today it's called the Iris School of Technology and Trades. And I enrolled in a 2-year apprenticeship to learn how to restore and build wooden boats. I just didn't have any direction for college. My parents were very observant of that, and they thought that this would be a good avenue for me to pursue. And while I was learning how to build boats at Iris, I started getting paid to sail and fill in on the 12-meter fleet in Newport. And I mean, the whole idea of getting paid to sail was amazing to me. And knowing also that I could use that as a vehicle to travel and see the world, again, was just like compounding how I had to do that. And what I did was I positioned myself to take my skill set as a wooden boat builder and use that to market myself as someone with little scale sailing experience on a professional level. But I had these unusual skills that made me stand out from your average crew member who maybe is just capable of sailing and maintenance. So at Iris, the focus was on yacht building. So everything we did had to be to perfection and absolutely perfect. So, and I love that. I love the whole idea of yachting. And I had my first job out of Iris was to restore America's oldest 12-meter yacht, Ottawa, US 6, built in 1928, and take her over to England and race in the America's Cup Jubilee, and then go down to the Med and sail in Porto Monaco, and southern France, a number of cities. And I love that. I love the whole lifestyle. I love the dinner, the glamour. I was very excited to be a yachty. And when that was over, I returned back to Newport, didn't have a job, didn't have a home, didn't know what I was going to do next. And there were no opportunities, except I got introduced to the Rose, which was a tall ship. And it's very different. Tall ship culture is, by law, tall ships are supposed to be nonprofit organizations. They're really sort of run very, very thin. Crews paid very, very little. it couldn't be a more different lifestyle than the yachting lifestyle that I was aspiring to live. And for me, that made it very hard to accept the opportunity. And I really only accepted it because I had no other opportunity. So it was sort of life saying, this is going to be your next chapter. This is what you're doing.
So how did you get into sailing in the first place? Like growing up, were you from a sailing family? Did you grow up near the ocean? What was like you said you didn't have direction in high school to college, but like what was I always ask people, like, what's the spark that kind of, was there a moment you're like, wait a minute, this sailing thing, this could be cool, or boats or whatever? Like, what was the moment that kind of set you down that path?
It's hard for me to define one moment. When I was a kid growing up, we would go to a little island called Block Island, which is 20 miles south of the Rhode Island coast. My family was not a family of sailors or boaters at all whatsoever. We'd go there and we'd have a beach vacation, a little cottage, and it was great. And I remember walking the docks as a kid and looking at boats. And I've always thought boats were cool. I mean, who doesn't think they're cool? My mom married my stepfather, and they got a sunfish sailboat together. And that was my first introduction to getting on a sailboat and being on the water and getting to take that sunfish and pull the sail in and sheet it in nice and tight and be in control of making that boat go where I wanted it to go was very exciting and invigorating for me. Then I was bar backing in high school and making a bunch of money. And I decided
Did you grow up was this like in Newport?
Oh, no. Sorry. This is in Connecticut.
Okay.
I grew up in upstate Connecticut. So sorry about that. And I'm bar backing in Connecticut as a high school kid. And a friend of mine has a 17-foot sailboat that got wrecked in a hurricane. It belonged to his grandfather, and they had it down in New London, which is on the Connecticut coast. So I bought it for $300 and thought, well, I'll learn how to fix this boat up. And I made every mistake. I did everything wrong. I mean, I didn't pull it off at all. It was a complete failure, but I loved the entire process of doing it. I mean, I wasted probably a couple $1,000s and learned about epoxy and fiberglassing and doing this and that. But I documented it all, and I kept this little journal, and I was drawing pictures and reading sailing magazines, which just made me love all that even more. So I think that's where we were on a weekend vacation in Newport, and we saw this newly opened school, Iris, on Thames Street. And I think that's where my parents kind of said, hey, you seem to really like this. Maybe we should look at doing something like this for you. And that, I think, was really what drove me into it.
What do your parents do? What did your parents do?
So my parents, my mom used to work, but at that point she was a homemaker, and my father, at that point, he was running the audio visual department of like the IT department of a university.
Okay, cool. So they sounds like, I mean, where I'm going with this is like you were headed down sort of a different path, and it sounds like your parents were encouraging of that. And I'm curious because it's not clear in the book. I mean, this happened 2001, 20 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, it started in 2001. We sailed in 2002.
But do you remain a professional sailor, or has your career changed since then? What do you do now?
So I remained a professional sailor for about 10 years, got a 100-ton near coastal captain's license with a sailing endorsement. Sailed a lot of wonderful places, lived in the Caribbean, did Central America, West Coast. Today, I'm more land-based. I just sail for fun. I've got a sailboat and cruise the California coast on it. And my work is more involved in architecture, where I develop architecture for projects, either new built, or what I really like to do is I have some clients where they have historic estates and they bring me in and I help employ sort of my restoration background and approach to developing the architectural plans and on what exists and what we're going to make these old homes become.
So nowhere in there, you professional sailor, architect, and now writer? Like, have you always been a writer?
No, I have not always been a writer. I know, right? Very random. And it was not something I aspired to do. I was at a New Year's party, I think in 2019 or something. And that's where I was telling the stories about this experience. And I did that thing I think a lot of people do, is say, oh, well, I should write a book. I just followed through with it and really, really dug into it.
So did you know at the time when this was all happening that, like, did you keep a journal? Did you ever think like something would come out of this? And were you like self-aware enough to know that what you were doing was like a pretty special thing that, you know, you'd hang on to for the next 20 years?
No, I had no idea. For one, there's a loaded question right there. Let's say I did not know how special an opportunity this would be, and I think that's what makes it more special. I mean, to have something unfold and then have the hindsight to go, oh my God, wow, that was just a once in a lifetime opportunity. In regards to keeping a journal, I did not keep a journal on the ship. But I, along with two other crew members, had a camcorder back in the day because it was before iPhones and phone cameras. And so the three of us were recorded a lot of footage. We compiled about 8.5 hours that we all shared with each other at the end of the journey. So I had that. I had a bunch of photos. And when I decided to write the book, I reached out to Captain Richard Bailey, who was the captain of the ship, and told him what I want to do. And he still has the ship's log. So he was flying out to California to fill in on a tall ship for a couple of weeks. So he brought the logbook with him and let me photograph it. And having that logbook, you know, entries recorded by the hour with what was going on, what the conditions were, really provided the backbone framework for this book. And then I reached out to all my shipmates, or as many as I could find. We had 30 people on the ship. I was able to get in touch with 22 of the 30. And of those 22, 3 had kept journals, which they shared with me. And I conducted recorded interviews with everyone. And we did at least 1 or 2 interviews recorded. And also everyone happily shared all their photos with me. So, you know, when I put all that material coming together, that's how I was able to really reconstruct what happened with such detail.
And did you, like, I'm very curious about this. I write a whole bunch for all the different sailing magazines, but I've never written a book. Did you like go to a publisher and say, hey, here's my idea? Or did you just like sit down and write it?
So I sat down and write it because I thought, I'm going to start writing this book and I'm going to do it for me. And if it becomes anything, then I'll self-publish. And so I was over a year into writing it out and I thought, well, wait a minute, I've gotten this far. Why would I just settle and self-publish? So I hired a development editor to work with me for a little bit, and she kind of, you know, sussed out what was good, what was bad. A lot of it was bad. And then helped me focus more on getting an agent, which was I wrote up sort of an outline. And in order to publish a book, you really have to write this sort of giant business plan. Why is this book going to be successful? You've got to study other comparable books. What's the audience going to be? Why would this be a good book? Try and get some endorsements. And so I worked with her for, I think, about like 6 or 7 months to create an actual book outline, work on some sample chapters. We identified what was really good in the story and what I should submit. And then what I did while we were doing that at the same time, I did a lot of research for finding a literary agent, which you need if you're going to go to a major publisher, because a major publisher is not going to talk to an author directly. So my focus first was doing that, and I profiled literary agents for months, and I built up a list of over 300, and I started then sending out the proposal, and I got a response within a couple weeks from my agent, a guy named Max Sinsheimer, and we went into contract within 30 days, and then we did the whole process again, except it went from amateur to professional, where Max said, okay, now we're really going to tighten up this proposal. And I had to go out and get a lot of big endorsements and sharpen what we had developed. So we spent 6 more months doing that. And then the book went out for sale to publishers, and we sold the book in 10 minutes, which was really amazing. Yeah, amazing. Like, he sent the email out, and he got an offer right back right away.
What was harder, writing the book or doing all that?
Well, it's funny you say that, because then what happened was I tried to keep the book very malleable and open, because your publisher is like a partner. And I wanted to be very flexible with that. And I think that this is important. I wrote what I wanted to write, but my publisher, they've got a lot of experience in publishing books. They have a great perspective. And my editor was so cool. His name's Jameson Stoltz. And Jameson was like a great professor or teacher. Imagine having this wonderful grandfather. He's a young guy, but have this wise man who is there to offer you context and an objective perspective. And Jameson really helped deepen the book, add more layers to it, really get me to think about perspectives that I had not considered. So I would say, I mean, I've probably rewrote the book maybe 6 or 7 times to what you're reading today.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Do you have an example of like something that like a story that he kind of helped you refine? Can you think of anything?
Yeah. I think like one of the best insights was he was a huge Patrick O'Brian fan himself. And we had talked about the idea of how can we kind of have some fun with Patrick O'Brian with this? Because I mean, I'm sailing to California to make a movie based on Patrick O'Brian's book series. And why not play with that a little bit by bringing in some of the fun accolades or stories that O'Brian wrote? And what I loved most was Jameson was so into O'Brian that he himself was sort of an encyclopedia where we could really go into this 20-book series, pick out some really funny components and say, well, how would that apply to us and how would that apply here? And I think when there's an excerpt I have about sort of our crew shenanigans on shore. And he was so fast about calling out the shenanigans of Jack Aubrey on shore himself, where there was, I think I even cite it in the book, where Jack was so drunk that even a 20-mile ride on his horse wasn't enough to sober him up. And
I remember that.
It was just fun having Jameson there to bounce this off of. And yeah.
So what did you like? This is a perfect segue into the Patrick O'Brian stuff. When you first signed on to Rose and you were working as a yachty and doing like, the other end of the spectrum, did you care at all about the Patrick O'Brian, the historical stuff, the tall ship world? Where was that in your frame of mind at that time? Did you care? Did you know about it?
I was aware of it, but I really wasn't. I really didn't appreciate that much because I thought, okay, I get it. I read the HMS SURPRISE book when I got the job offer, and I thought, all right, I'm doing the real thing, and here's this fiction book. So how much of this do I really care about and want to read? And so I didn't drink the Kool-Aid or jump into it, but it was interesting. It was fun. There were elements that I liked. It really wasn't until I started this project of writing this book where I thought, well, let me learn some more, because this guy was so good that he was this writing phenomenon. And what did he do so well that made the whole world fall in love with him and his characters? And when I had the time later in life with the maturity I've had to dig back into it, I'm just so impressed with what Patrick O'Brian was able to do not being a sailor. And when I think about all the research that I put into my book and studying him and the research that he put into his books, I can't help but just tip my hat and say, wow, what an incredible individual who's able to, on his own, before you had the internet, figure out, I'm going to go find these old ship logs and all these old books, and I'm going to study how these sailors, the tactics that they used and learn their own vernacular and write about that in such a integrated and complex way.
Well, not only that, you wrote one book, he wrote 20.
Yeah. Well, I'm starting to work on the next one, so hopefully I'll catch up to him. But I think he got to 20 in this series by 80, so I've still got a little bit of time to try and catch up.
So are you a writer now? Is that a thing? Or have you hooked into this? Is this going to be a new side career or a new career?
Yeah. I'm really enjoying it quite a bit. I do write freelance for a number of maritime periodicals. And I am very excited. My publisher's given me a soft green light on the next book, and I'm doing my research and development on that and excited about what that could be. It was nice cutting my teeth with All Hands on Deck, and knowing what I know now, I'm very excited about what's to come.
Oh, that's awesome. So are you a reader as well? Like what books, sailing books, I guess, specifically or otherwise, inspire you?
Yes, I love to read. I will tell you, let's see, my favorite sailing books will be, I'm going to start off with Maiden Voyage with Tanya Abbey.
Yep.
I love her book. It's incredible. I think Tanya, just what she did at her age was outstanding. I do love a lot of classic sailing literature, like Eric Newby. He's really wonderful. The Last Grain Race was just a great read.
I'm looking at it right now. It's on the bookshelf on Falcon. That's also one of my favorites.
That's definitely one of the first that I recommend to anyone. Even let's say it's not sailing, but Boys in the Boat, which is about a crew team. I mean, that to me is a wonderful book. It's about people working together. And I personally, when I like to read, I definitely love my history, but I'm most interested in reading about how people interact with one another. Sally Rooney is one of my favorite, more contemporary authors. She doesn't write about sailing, but she writes about people and their lives, and I love that kind of stuff.
So speaking of interacting, you describe, these various camps on the boat. You have the officers, you had the you guys, the ex-yachties, and then you have the Planet Tall Shippers. Can you just go into a little bit of detail about what you meant by that, specifically like the whole Planet Tall Ship thing? I thought that was a really fun description.
Me too. I love that. I came up with Planet Tall Ship because we've got 30 people on this ship, plus there's outside characters as well. And it's really hard for a reader to keep track of all these people. And I thought, as a writing mechanism, it would be, creating Planet Tall Ship would be a way for me to categorize the crew so that you kind of can simplify the groups for the readers. So the Planet Tall Ship members of the crew were the people who loved the tall ship lifestyle, almost acted as if they wanted to live 200 years ago. They loved tar, they loved marlin, not into anything new. Sailing tall ships or square riggers for the rest of their life would be the greatest thing in the world. And singing sea shanties, that kind of stuff. And I had another group that I called the Rebels, which I considered myself to be part of, which is kind of ironic because I'm on this ship and the Rebels were people like me who are more, no, I want to be a yachty. I love carbon fiber and modern technology. And I'm all interested in learning what Harkin's going to be putting out next season. And then there were the floaters, they're the people who can kind of drift in between either group. They're not passionate about one or the other, and they somehow seem to get along with everyone. And I also think that, these three groups are a lot of parallels to how society or people are today. You'll have one group against the other, and then you got to kind of have a bunch of people in the middle who just kind of get along with everyone.
Was there actual conflict between the yachties and the Planet Tall Ship people, or was that just a framing device? Did you guys have real conflict on the ship?
Yeah, absolutely. There was definitely a lot of legitimate conflict. There's a character, Dwight, who's the bosun in the book, and we just didn't get along for whatever it was. And I mean, and there's a truth to that. I mean, you take 30 people and you put them on a ship like this or any situation. And if you're going to tell me that everyone is going to get along hunky-dory, well, that's just not true. That's not possible. So we're living together. We're in very stressful situations. And we've got cultural differences. Dwight in the book, he loves everything about tall ships and 200 years ago, and probably would have loved to have sailed on a ship with no electricity, no engines, going by candlelight, that kind of stuff. And we just didn't get along. I do think, though, that Dwight he had incredible knowledge, and I'm grateful that he was part of the journey because I wouldn't be here without him. When times got really tough and we had some of the life-threatening situations that we had, he was amazing at doing his job. There wasn't even a question about it. And I also really learned a lot that differences should and can easily be pushed aside when the real moments matter. And I don't know about you, but I have found that to be the case through tried moments in life. And for me, that's a big part of All Hands on Deck I think All Hands on Deck is more of a criticism of myself because I introduced the book. I'm very passionate about these people that I don't like, that I don't identify. But then as I progressed through the story, I realized that I was maybe overly judgmental and unfair about those judgments. And even though we disagree or don't get along, everybody was important, and I'm grateful that everyone who was there was there.
So what were you like? You said you were 21 when you went on the Rose. Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I got the impression, and reading between the lines a little bit, because from some of the stories, it sounded like you and I think you had one of your friends on board as well. You guys were kind of the goofballs and out drinking and stuff. And I pictured in my head, kind of rolled my eyes like, all right, this is one of these yachty people that I can't stand when I go into a port like that. Were you like that, or because now talking to you don't give me that impression at all now, but in the book I kind of got this impression that you maybe thought highly of yourself, if that's a fair description.
That's absolutely fair. And I loved being a yachty, and I loved drinking, and I thought I was the center of the world and having fun and going to bars and trying to, pick up girls and stuff. And that's where, through this experience and, at the end of the book, I arrive in San Diego, and I myself, I'm wearing clothes covered in tar and stained, and I am arriving back I left America in the Atlantic, and I arrived back in America in the Pacific after a harrowing experience. And I feel more comfortable with the people I'm around than the people I'm anxious to meet in California. What is California going to be like? What is California culture? Am I going to arrive? And it was odd. So, I think I was that obnoxious person that you queued up on, and I'll own that for sure. But I like to. Well, I mean, you kind of. Yeah, you kind of admit that as much in the book, but I just thought we'd dig a little deeper on that, and I guess I'm also curious, because I think your sailing background, as you described it, as a yachty working on modern boats, sort of parallels mine. But I've always been really attracted to the planet tall ship, so to speak, but I've never actually done it. So what is it like? What is it like? Going aloft and climbing out on a yard, and what did you learn about, I guess, seamanship as opposed to sailing in general? What did you learn that you took with you after that experience? Well, let me do a little precursor to that. So when I first got that job on Ottawa, that 12 meter to go over to Europe, that was my first, okay, great. You've got a job as a yachty and you're going to go race in the Mediterranean. And the captain who hired me was this man named Casey Fasciano, and he's got a big tall ship background. Casey spent most of his career sailing tall ships, like Pride of Baltimore 2, Rose, and it goes on and on and on. And so Casey, when I got hired, I was told by a lot of people who said, look, you're really lucky. I mean, this guy, he's not just a boat captain. I mean, he knows so much about seamanship. He is going to teach you more than anyone else in the harbor is going to teach you. And he really did that. He was very active as a captain, not to just tell me what to do as a deckhand, but he wanted me always thinking. When we were going to dock the boat, I remember going in to dock the boat at one point, and I thought, okay, this is great. We got in, everything was great. And afterwards, he kind of chastised me and said, what were you doing? And I said, well, I went and docked lines like we were supposed to. He goes, you know what? I need you to think about how we're going to dock. So every time we dock the boat going forward, you are going to tell me how I'm going to dock the boat and what dock lines, are going to use at, what order. And he said, the reason why is I really need you to be thinking about how my things work, because if something happens to me, your role is going to be that much more important. And so, Casey's the reason why I got the job on Rose. And what my experience on Rose did for me was it was an intense education on the foundation of today's, I'd say, modern seamanship, where I'm really learning about how and why we do things. And even though the mechanisms of operating a ship like Rose are archaic and don't apply to in the yachting world today, I felt that I had a better foundation after the Rose where I went back onto yachts. I was able to do more. I was more versatile. I was more independent. I was able to problem solve and think through situations much more effectively than I was before my experience on Rose, where on a yacht, I was polishing bronze winches and I was repacking the spinnaker and I was washing the boat down and chamoising the varnish. Whereas on Rose, you're not doing any of that. You're really functioning and maintaining the actual mechanics of the ship.
So was there a couple of points, I mean, talking about seamanship, you guys left in, was it January or February? And I'm glad you mentioned it in the book, because in my head, I'm just thinking like, oh shit, this is like the same story as the Bounty when they sank in Hurricane Sandy. It's like, it started like the same way. You even mentioned like on the dock, you had this strange gut feeling where you wondered if you should go or not, and you went. So what was that like? And were there doubts with you when you guys left? And then when you got in that storm, if you can just describe that briefly and how it related to, because like I said, you mentioned the Bounty in the book, which I'm really glad you did, because it was a very similar story. So what did that feel like at the time?
At the time, I'm definitely, if you knew me, like some of my friends, you'd say, I'm a person who jumps in head first to what I'm doing. Even though I was resistant to the Rose, once I knew I was part of it, I swallowed it up. And even though I had the Planet Tall ship and my resistance with some stuff, I'm a person that believes like, if you're here, you've just got to dig in. So as a deckhand, I was on a need to know basis. I was at the bottom of the pecking order, right? So I didn't know that much about what sort of weather we were going to be sailing into, but I also knew that we were going to be departing from Newport, and we were going to be in the North Atlantic in January, a cold, terrible time of year to sail, but we were heading down to warmer waters. When I think about, it's great that you bring up the Bounty too, because right now I'm doing an active book tour, and I always like to talk about the Bounty when I'm doing my presentation, because I think that we had a lot of parallels to the Bounty, and you have so many things go wrong, and I think unfortunately for the Bounty, too many things went wrong, and for us, we had a lot of things go wrong, but we had a lot of things go right. And that is why my story is very different from the story of the Bounty, but too many parallels, too much, too many similarities. That said, Captain Richard Bailey, our three officers, Tony Arrow, Andy Ellers, and Christina Sobrin, were outstanding with their leadership. They were very, they maintained a lot of order. They stayed calm. They were very collected, and they were really diligent about making sure that we maintained our system of operation. When I say that, even like the log book is diligently filled. Everyone kept an active record of what was going on. We were strict about our watch sessions. We were strict on taking care of each other. Even we had a crew reunion panel in Newport a couple weeks ago. It was fantastic, where 14 crew members flew in from around the world, and we got up on stage and talked. And one of the crew members, Todd Conklin, had brought up where he just remembers Tony going around telling everyone, stay hydrated, put sunscreen on, just silly little things like that. Everybody was looking out for each other and taking care of each other. And I think it's sad what happened to the Bounty. And my comment would be, thank God that we had the awesome leadership of our officers on Rose. And I think that is what got us through the worst of it.
How much of what you describe in the book as, harrowing and life-threatening and stuff, how much of that was dramatized for the book versus what you actually felt in the moment? Because it sounded like, in particular, that the first Atlantic storm, was pretty touch and go, the way you described how badly the ship was leaking. How much of that was dramatic for the book versus what you felt like in the moment?
So I'll break down one element with that, where there's when I go up into the forepeak to make sure our pumps are running, and we're taking so much water, right? And I talk about going down the ladder, and it feels like a grenade is exploding every time the ship hits the bottom of a wave trough. And when I'm down there, that's when I see something really terrifying, where the bow is flexing so much that when she gets pressed, I can see daylight coming through the seams, and and there's so much water coming in when that's happening. And I'll say that really happened, and I really felt as terrifying as I write about. But what I did was I did so much research, reading a lot of books in intense situations to try to think about how I could, with as few words as possible, put you, the reader, in that situation to really get it. And I, unfortunately, at the time, I think it's happening so fast that you don't have the context to think about it. And there's a bit of a blessing to that. Like when I see that happening, I'm in the moment. It's terrifying, but I can't really think about how terrifying that is at the moment because I'm trying to hold on because the bow keeps hitting these wave troughs and I don't want to fall or get hurt and I need to get in and out of there as fast as I can. So I'm registering what's going on, but it's a little bit of autopilot too, if that makes sense, where I don't have time to have that emotional context of like, oh my God, this is terrible. You should never see light through planking seams. When I'm going aloft in that storm, and I think I've learned when I do my talk to know your audience. I'm up in Alaska earlier this year, up in Kodiak, talking about this experience, and I'm describing the weather conditions. And a lot of the guys in the room, these are the Alaska fishermen. They're kind of going, "Hey, you're kind of preaching to the wrong guys about bad weather. Like we've seen some stuff," and they were absolutely right. What I've learned that sort of makes maybe my scenario a little more unique is today those guys aren't free climbing 60 feet up their rig and then 30 feet out on the end of a yard arm kind of a thing. They're all sitting in their bridge that's enclosed and not dealing with the weather in that sort of way. For me, going aloft in that kind of weather was, I didn't say anything to Tony, but I'm actually kind of terrified of heights, but I also just believe you've just got to do what you're supposed to do when you're called upon to do it. And I did that. But when I was writing the book, I really wanted to make sure that I didn't embellish what I was going through. So I used AutoCAD and I figured out the geometry because I wanted to really understand actually how far were we swinging, for example. Because I tell you, I'm saying, look, I go up this high and we are swinging every, 40 to 60 feet from port to starboard every 4 to 6 seconds. I think I'd say something like that. So what I did though was I drew that out to scale and say, okay, this is how far up the rig I was. This is where I was. And then I've got all that film footage. And what I'm doing is I'm watching the horizon and I'm counting on a clock how long it's taking us to swing so that I could, in the book, tell you this is how fast we were moving. This is what was going on. So hopefully not to embellish, but try to get you, the reader, to go, okay, I understand the context of what he's talking about while I'm sitting here reading this.
That's really cool that you say that because like that, we joke, when I do our sailing passages, most of the time that people that sail with us have never been offshore before, and everybody always wants to know how big the waves are. And, the joke is, but it's also kind of true, ask someone that's never been on the ocean, ask them how big they think they are, and then just divide by 2, because everybody always embellishes. But that's pretty cool that you gave that backstory, because, you could easily read that as an exaggeration, but I like that you kind of applied your architect brain to it and just said, let's actually figure this out. That's really cool.
What I also, I wrote this book very defensively because I want all hands on deck to be an accurate representation of what we went through. And I didn't want people to say, there's no way, that's not true, that didn't happen, or that's not possible. And that's where I put so much effort into researching the book and making sure I get every fact right with the weather and the conditions. And fortunately, I'm going to go back to the three of us having the video camera and recording the film footage. I've put together this 30-minute curated talk where I'm able to then, for my audience, one of my best venues was that Newport event where we're in the theater, and I can put up on a giant screen and show you this footage of this storm where you've got Rose doing 60-degree rolls. And I think anyone who's been to any of my presentations will say, yeah, no, this is what you're reading is what we did. And you can see that for real.
That is cool. That is gnarly, but that is cool. So you make it sound like in the book when you first were asked to go aloft, like you just admitted that you were kind of this obnoxious yachty guy, and yet it seemed like you were sort of called upon more often than maybe some of the other deckhands. Like why is that? Why do you think that was? Like what was that about?
Well, I wondered for years, why did so for anyone listening to this who hasn't read the book, the chief mate, Tony, hires me onto the ship. And as I found out later on, Casey, who I talked about earlier in this interview, is my mentor. Tony had started his career under Casey. And I think that there was a little bit of a nudge from Casey to say, hey, can you take this guy and show him the ropes? And so Tony kind of took me under his wing. He put me on his watch. And I wondered for years why in these situations where we're in the middle of this fear storm, why does he ask me to go off? There are a lot of other people on the ship much more experienced than me with this kind of sailing. And then we have the dismasting in the Caribbean Sea. And again, Tony tasked me to go aloft. So I finally get to ask him when I was interviewing for this book. And I said, why me? Like, there are all these other people. And Tony said, well, I knew that you do it. I knew that I wasn't worried about you getting up and down. And I also, those weren't moments for opportunity for people. It wasn't, hey, I want to give so-and-so a chance. It was, I need to pick on someone who I know is going to get the job done and get back down okay. And he told me that's just simply what it came down to, was he trusted me and believed in me.
How did that make you feel when he told you that?
It made me feel great. It made me feel honored that he felt that way. Of all the people on the ship, when I was interviewing all my shipmates, everyone asked about Tony. Everybody wanted to know what Tony was doing today and how he was doing. He really, and I talk about in the book, if there was a leader who inspired me or taught me the most about how to be a great leader, it was Tony, where he had a way about himself. He was commanding, respectful, courteous. He didn't need to yell at anyone. He's very inspirational. He taught me a lot about how to inspire the people around me through kindness and fairness. And there isn't anything I wouldn't have done for him. And today, there isn't anything I wouldn't do for him still.
That's pretty cool. That's those are the kind of people you remember, whether it's a teacher or a coach or whatever. That's really cool. How did your life change after this? And I'm curious, like, for yourself personally, but one thing I meant to ask you, you mentioned in the book there was a high school kid who got, it sounded like taking a year off of high school or something to do this, and you mentioned a couple times, how is this kid ever going to go back to high school after an experience like this? So how did that experience change his life? What did he end up doing, and how did it change your life?
Well, so the kid in the book, we call him Mandrew. His name is Andrew, and he's on the ship for a few days, and everyone starts calling him Andrew. He's 16 years old, and he's a cousin of the captain, but no sailing background. I mean, he's never done anything like this, and he was a high school kid in Pennsylvania, and so Mandrew sails through this experience, and then we arrive in California, and his father picks him up and brings him back, and he goes to school and resumes his life. One of my favorite things about writing this book is after seeing Captain Bailey, and he gives me the logbook, a couple of weeks later, he tells me, he says, hey, Mandrew just moved from Berlin back to America, and he moved to Los Angeles, and he gave me his number, and I hadn't spoken to him for over 15 years. And so I reached out to him and invited him over to come, to my house and meet my wife and daughter. And I thought, what am I thinking? I don't even know what this person's going to be like. And I'll tell you what, he has become one of the most important people in my life. Like, we are partner. We bought a boat together, and it's like an uncle to my daughter. He's doing great. He got married last fall and just had a son in December. And we're like brothers. It's a beautiful thing where we are today.
So he's still a sailor if you guys own a boat together?
Yeah, we bought a boat together, and we keep it in Marina del Rey, and we race it occasionally, and life is it's pretty special, especially having the context of how we met, where we came from, and where we are today. And getting to share this, writing this book, and sharing it with each other, where he's come and seen some of my presentations. It's a lot of fun.
So when you got off the boat, then what? How do you even process something like that in the moment? And how do you go to okay, now I got to do the next thing?
Well, I love that you asked that, because that, I think it goes back to is like the seamanship sort of. I thought that when I'd gotten back from Europe, I thought I was hot shit. I mean, I was just come back from racing the America's Cup Jubilee and doing the Prada Classic Yacht Challenge. And I was great at what I did and all that kind of stuff. And I knew everything. And not that, I mean, I would still learn more, but I thought I was on top of my game. And the experience on the roads really taught me a lot of other stuff I didn't know that I could learn. And I got offered a job by Casey to go back to the Northeast, to New England, and be the mate on Ottawa. She had since returned to America, and Casey had brought her up from Florida to New England. The opportunity to sail under Casey again, but as the mate, and explore New England seemed like a great opportunity. And it was a great opportunity, because here I am now coming back to him with so many more skills than I had in the past, and him ready to continue to teach me more skills. But I did have, it created a hunger in me for wanting to sail offshore more. And it definitely opened my eyes to where I thought, oh, sailing on the 12 meter is the pinnacle and the greatest thing I've ever done. And it made me say, no, there's a lot of opportunity out there. And what other cool things could I find that I'm not thinking of or aware of?
So I got to ask the obvious question. Did you like the movie? You went to the whole point of this trip was to deliver a boat for a movie. Did you like the movie, and do you think they accurately portrayed what the boat was like?
I liked the movie. I did. And you're hearing that hesitation in my voice because, yeah, it was a good movie. Okay. I liked it. I mean, it was a movie about sailing and I had a background tied to it. But I'll say that when writing this book really changed my perspective on that significantly, where I liked it. But then I'm studying Patrick O'Brien. I reached out to Peter Weir, and Peter Weir helps me with this book. And getting to talk to Peter Weir, who's the director of Master and Commander, about why he wrote the script the way he did, about his sailing, what he did to film that movie, really made me look at the movie in a whole different light and just go, oh my God, like I really like that. His attention to detail was just incredible. And beyond that too, like when I think about Tom Rothman, who's the chairman of Sony, who Tom ended up writing the introduction to this book, and getting to hear him talk about why he wanted to make this movie. When I add these elements and I have these men who vested millions and millions and millions of dollars to make this movie and learn about why and how they did the way they did. Now, when I see Master and Commander, I do see it as one of the greatest works of art in regards to a sailing movie. I think Master and Commander is so much more than a movie about sailing. To me, it's a documentary of the way men lived then. And I think that if I was a teacher in a history class, I'd probably try and put this movie on to say this isn't an accurate standard. And I even almost wonder if Master and Commander in some ways could be called a benchmark of where today in Hollywood we want, as viewers, a lot of accuracy in the movies that we watch today. And there's a lot of criticism when movies are not accurate. And you look at Master and Commander, even though it's 20 years old, how much demand was there for accuracy 20 years ago versus today? And I think Master and Commander is going to stand that test of time where people will always have to say, wow, this movie isn't just a sailing movie. It's so accurate. You really get to see what life was like then.
If only Peter Weir had directed All Is Lost, how much better of a movie could that have been?
Oh my God. I love that you said that. I mean, after I saw that movie, I really wanted to write Robert Redford a letter and say, please, I will consult for free if you ever want to make a movie about sailing again.
I know, it's such a shame. They clearly didn't have anybody on that set that was a sailor, man. But not to take away from Master and Commander, because I agree with you. I think that's really cool. In fact, I can't wait to share this podcast with August, who's our skipper of Eastbjorn, the Swan 48 over in Bergen, and those books are his all-time favorite books. He's read them several times, and he loves the movie. And I told him I was interviewing this and about the book and stuff. He's very excited to hear about it and read the book. So that's really cool. Well, Will, we're winding down here on time, and I've got a boat to get ready to go offshore. But what do you want to share about the book that I haven't asked you? Is there something that you're just dying to talk about that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, I think. Thank you for that opportunity, Andy. What I'd like to say is, I think that we are in a really precarious point right now in society where a lot of people are stuck on their devices. And I don't think many people listening to this podcast are those people. But I am here today because when I was a teenager, I read some great books by some contemporary authors like John Krakauer's Into Thin Air and Sebastian Junger's The Perfect Storm. And those books really gave me the courage to make my own adventure, to go out there and take a path lesson, like go become a wooden boat builder instead of going off to college like I thought I should do. And that probably would have been the worst mistake I could have made if I did that, because it wasn't the right path for me. But I wrote this book hoping to inspire another generation of people to feel better about taking a risk, getting uncomfortable, get out there and break free from the shackles of what you think you should be doing and maybe follow your passion and take a chance. And so I do hope that maybe some sailors listening to this story might say, hey, maybe it is worth checking out the Picton Castle or the Bark Europa, because you might be great at what you're doing on the boat that you're on, but why not try and actually diversify? Because I do think you can translate and incorporate skill sets that you learn on the different types of vessels. And I think tall ship sailing made me a better yachty. So that's awesome. Fantastic. That's so poignant too, where I am now, like watching the Blue Nose sail in and out of the harbor. And we just got to tour Old Town Boat Works, wooden boat builder. It's just like it's a different world. It's the same thing. You know, we're all sailing. It's the same seamanship's the same, but like it's so different. That's awesome. And like I said at the beginning, it's really cool to realize that like you're a contemporary. You're not. This didn't happen 80 years ago. You know, you're my age, and this is still happening. You can still do this now. Like I love that. It's so cool. Yeah, I think it's amazing. You still do it, and like get out there and don't think that one way is the only way. I mean, I always get frustrated when I hear someone say that they're a power boater or a sailor, one or the other. I mean, I love both. So, you know, when there's no wind, it's kind of fun to bomb around in a Boston whaler as fast as you can. And when there's a great breeze, who doesn't want to be, you know, close hauled and pressed down? But I think with sailing, like, I don't want to be that person who will only sail on a carbon fiber boat. Like, I love Swan 48s, and I also love old wooden schooners. Like, they're all great in their own way. So why not treat it like a cheese board and taste a little bit of it all?
Cool, man. Well, hey, if you ever want to go offshore again, we've got a apprentice / extra friend / extra bunk on Falcon now. So just let me know. We'll get you out there. We're sailing like 15,000 miles a year now. It's pretty cool.
Andy, I love what you guys are doing. I love following you guys. I mean, you are crushing it, and I love seeing how your program has continued to evolve. And in any way that I can support you guys, please let me know, because I am here for you.
Cool, man. Thanks so much. Well, I'll be in touch to get some photos and some more info from you, and I'll let you know when this is going to come out. And then the next time I'm back in the U.S., I don't know if you have plans to be at the Annapolis Boat Show in the fall, but if you do have plans, let's talk, because we got some stuff going on there, and it could be fun.
I wish I could, but I'm happy to say I think when it's happening, I'm going to be flying, going to speak in England. I'm doing a bunch of stuff in London.
Awesome. Cool.
Right.
Well, cool, man. Well, we'll help promote the book as much as we can, and thanks again for doing this. It's been great talking to you. Hope we can meet in person someday. Yeah,
look forward to it. And seriously, if there's anything I can do for you guys, please do let me know.
Big thanks again to Forbes Horton Yachts for sponsoring this episode of the show. If you want to buy or sell your dream boat, go to ForbesYachts.com. That's FORBES, ForbesYachts.com. Thanks also to AG1 for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. To get your free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase, go to drinkag1.com/onthewind. That's drinkalphagolf1.com/onthewind. On the Wind is the podcast about sailing, created by 59 North and hosted by me, Andy Schell, and also by Nikki Henderson, August Sandberg, Emma Garshagen, and occasionally Ben Doer. The show is mixed and produced in Frederick, Maryland by Lee Cumberland. Ads are read by us, the hosts, and occasionally by 59 North's bosun Adam Brown and podcast producer Lee Cumberland. Episode artwork and website show notes are done by Laura Parent in San Francisco. The intro theme music is composed and performed by former podcast guest, musician, and sailor Cameron Dale, while the outro music you're hearing now is, of course, by our friends in Bergen, the Stormweather Shanty Choir. We love hearing from our fans, so send your questions and comments to holdfast@59-north.com, and please do us a favor and review the show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, hold fast.
I made up me mind that I was inclined to go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. I made up me mind that I was inclined to go to sea no more. As I was walking down the street, I met sweet Angeline. She said, come home with me, me lad, and we'll have a cracking time. But when I awoke, it was no joke. I found I was all alone. My silver watch and my money too, and my whole bloody gear was gone. Was gone, was gone. My whole bloody gear was gone. It was when I awoke, it was no joke, for my whole bloody gear was gone. As I was walking down the street, I met Big Rapper Brown. I asked him if he would take me in, and he looked at me with a frown. He said,
last time you was paid up with me, you took up no score. But I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea once more.
once more, once more, to go to sea once more. I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea once more. Sometimes we're catching whales, me lads, but mostly we get none. With a 20-foot oar in every paw from 5 o'clock in the morn. And when daylight's gone and the night's coming on, we rest upon our oars. And oh boys, you wish that you was dead or snug with the girls ashore. Ashore, ashore, or snug with the girls ashore. Oh boys, you wish that you was dead or snug with the girls ashore. Come all you seafaring lads that listen to me song. When you go a big boating, boys, make sure you do not go wrong. You take my tip when you come off a trip, don't go with any whores. But get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. Get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. Get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more.